pleasure to be here. Of course, I lived in the whole area for the late 60s. So I kind of know Seminole, lived in Seminole, Dunedin, and Ozona now.
Brian, can you talk into the microphone?
Is that better?
That's a
Yeah,
little
okay.
bit better, thank you.
I know you can't. I should hold it real close. So anyway, point is, I'm Brian Smith. I graduated from Florida State University with a bachelor's in physics and then a master's in city planning. So I then came down to this area, to Pinellas County, and was hired by Pinellas County as a planner in 1970. And then from there, I then retired in 2011, November 2011, and after 41 years. So in 30 years of that, I was the county planning director. Pretty much have been planning director most of the time with all this secret going on. Most development occurring and things like that. That kind of background, but the main point I want to talk tonight about the Pinellas Trail. The Pinellas Trail actually has a history to it.
Can you just talk up a little louder, because we can barely hear you back here.
Okay.
They can turn that up. Let's see if we can turn up a little bit.
Good, okay. That sounds good.
How's that? I just don't want it to
Yeah.
feedback. How's
I
that?
can hear the humming, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
How's that?
That sounds good.
Do you want to have this as like holding it a little bit or something?
That'll be a way to avoid.
Okay. Yeah. You usually just gotta like, kind of like talk to
Yeah.
it.
So anyway, basically it's all started 130 years ago. And in the 1890s, the railroad was built going through Florida, down through Tarpon Springs, through Clearwater to St. Petersburg. And that was when things started for us in the county, because previous to that, you pretty much had only water access. So if you wanted to go from Clearwater to St. Petersburg, you couldn't go. So the railroad pretty much was the transportation on land for 30 years before the county didn't start building the road system until the 1920s. Basically, the railroad was therefore the way we got around. And that was pretty much the way it was. The other thing I was going to mention was also, that meant that all the pattern of development occurred for those first 30 years. It was pretty much around the railroad. That's why no surprise, you still got a lot of activity all along that corridor. And that worked in the favor of the county, the trail, when we put it in, because it would be connected to the same place again. So basically, happened, the railroad was in use and running up through the 1980s. Around 82 or 83, they initiated the abandonment procedure to stop running the railroad and be kind of doing other things. So the railroad then was required to give the state of Florida the first right of refusal for the property. So basically, we worked with Senator Griswold at the time, who was very influential in the state, and got about approximately $30 million for the acquisition of that corridor. And in the state implementation, basically, the reason I say that is because whatever you did with the corridor, if we had it owned now, 34 miles of continuous ownership of land, you would pretty much were going to have to spend it on transportation. You couldn't do any other use for it. When you consider the fact that the corridor was, we worked for the railroad, but there was a place where it's 40 feet wide, other places where it's 60 feet wide, and then sometimes 100. The point is, it wasn't wide enough that you could do that much of it. So basically, it kind of stayed vacant. And so we were trying to even put a train on ourselves, it didn't work. We also considered the monorail part of the train. That didn't work either. So basically, in the mid-1980s, Pinellas County established a light committee, which is a federal requirement. And they were looking around for how we could solve the problem of safety and having a safe way for people to park themselves. And so they started looking at the corridor, this railroad corridor, which is the city vacant. Basically, at the same time as that, Pinellas County was developing a plan, a Mangrove plan. In 1985, the legislature passed the Mangrove, required every local government to basically establish a Mangrove plan, and then how we not only then we provide for development with respect to roads, or sewer, parks, and so like that. Okay, is that better? Anyway, so basically, when it came down to that
That's what.
And so the Pinellas County was putting together a managed growth plan, which was required by the state legislature. And what we worked with this in the state legislators. Basically, what that meant is projecting the future growth and laid out land use. And you actually calculated the kind of services you needed to support that development. And that would be the water, sewer, transportation, things like that. And when we did that, we were identifying the transportation of all types, even safety projects. So what happened was the Pinellas Trail became defined by the bike committee, and with that corridor from Tarpon Springs to St. Petersburg, where US 19 ends in Tarpon Springs and the same as US 19 in St. Petersburg, 34.5 miles. And basically, that became the Pinellas Trail proposal. And that was included in the managed growth plan, had to have money to build all the things that were needed. And basically, in Pinellas County, there was over $1 billion worth of things to do. And the Pinellas Trail became one of those things that were listed in that program, and became part of the referendum that was held in 1989 to basically authorize the sales tax. The state legislature not only required to have a managed growth plan, but then they knew you had to provide facilities for it where you get the money. So basically, the sales tax was scheduled in 1989, and it included $8 billion for the Pinellas Trail, which was not only a 15-foot wide paved surface, but also 3 overpasses. One at Overton Road, one at East Bay Drive, and one on Route 19 up in Tarpon Springs, up in the Ozona area. So basically that went to referendum, and it was approved by 300 votes. And a lot of people feel that it wouldn't have passed if you didn't have the Pinellas Trail in there because 300 votes was more than that. But basically that then kicked the whole program forward. Interesting that the Penny for Pinellas program after that became even more popular, and it was every 10 years being renewed. So it became a 2/3 vote, not just a 300, but actually 2/3 of the people thought it was a good idea. The last time it was done, a couple of years ago, it was 83% approval. So that, even with the tax, it's a tax that people were sold on. So what's interesting about this is the fact that it was done as a safety project. The bike committee wanted to find a safe place again for people to bike, pedestrian, and roadway. And so this was a safety project. We found that after we got this thing built, there were a lot of need. We had gaps in the corridor. We also had need for extending service as well. And so basically we needed more money. And the other pots of money were pretty much transportation programs that were focused on highways and were focused on transit, things like that. Basically, we had to find a transportation source that would allow for trails. We had to so we ran a survey of the people using the trail that was built, and found that 2/3 of the people that were on the trail weren't there for recreation, they were for shopping, work, school, social, all those different activities like that. So basically we had built a transportation corridor. That also meant we could then tap into transportation money, which is what we did. Basically then went forward building is not only the existing trail, we then tapped money for overpasses as an example, and then filling gaps. There were 2 significant gaps. One was here in Seminole. It was the Ocasega Bridge that we have sort of south of here, and that basically was an open water area. It was like almost a half mile of nothing. It used to be a railroad line, a railroad corridor, and the trestle had put it down. So basically it was nothing. We had to kind of fill that gap in. And then in addition to that, around Clearwater as an example, there was no corridor through there that was actually selected. So there's a lot of pieces like that. So we wound up then tapping into this program and doing all these other trails with this funding we had. One of the things we then got into was the fact that it's sort of an environmental program, I guess, to say. And the western side of the county was then served with this corridor. There was nothing on the rest of the county. Basically, I had self-designated myself as the bike pedestrian coordinator, and then I started meeting with the bike committee. And we was talking to them about on the west side you had the 34-mile existing rail, but then on the east side there was nothing. And so basically there was a power line over there, Florida Power, and there was a 20-mile corridor that you could actually put a trail under if they were agreeable. So basically I asked the committee, I said, well, have we looked at putting the trail on the power line? They said, yes, we did. We proposed that to the power company, but they didn't, they declined to do that. I said, well, how many times did you ask them? They said, once. So I said, well. So we worked up this really cool letter that explained the value of the trail and the benefit to Florida Power. And we sent that to the CEO of Florida Power. And to my amazement, 2 weeks later, the CEO of Florida Power and 2 of his assistants were in my office saying that they were receptive to the idea. I wanted to work with the county on doing the trail. So then I went down the next day to Fred Marcos, the county administrator, and said, we can, it looks like Florida Power is receptive to doing this thing. He authorized me to start working with the group to come up with an agreement that the county could then approve. And what's interesting was, sort of negotiating an agreement between the power company and the county was interesting because it was a real challenge because they had never worked together as partners. It had always been one was regulating the other. For instance, the county would want to put something in the power line area, and the power line would have to approve that, or the company would. Same is true. So this was the first time we were actually working together as partners. So it took us several months to get the whole agreement put together. And then when we put it together, it was a 99-year lease, and you'd have to give $150,000 a year to the power company to do that. Basically, we then carried that forward to the county commission. But before we did, about a week before we did, one of the budget people at the budget office ran out. There was an escalator clause in the $150,000, which was like 2 or 3% a year. And since it was a 99-year lease, someone in the budget office calculated it was $1 million and something a year at that point. So this project was kind of slowing down, but it wasn't going to be approved. And then County Commissioner Karen Seal came up with the idea of using naming rights. And we could call it the Florida Power Trail. Of course, later it was Duke Trail. The Florida Power Trail. And basically, the power company agreed with that. So then from then on, we then the eastern side of the county got the Florida Power Trail, which is now the Duke Energy Trail. And we had these 2 major corridors that were now going forward. We realized it was so popular that I also then met with different cities in the county as to what other trails they would like to do. And we put them all on the plan. So St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Largo, Seminole, so. And we put together a package of trails. And it was like over 250 miles worth of trails all on this map. And then we started realizing this looked like a lot of spaghetti. It didn't have any purpose to it. It didn't look too good. So basically, at that point, we looked at the 2 corners. We thought, wait a minute, we've got 34 miles on the rail line on one side, west side of the county. We've got 20 miles on the east side of the county. If we were to go and tie those together, right across the top of the county, go through Tarpon Springs down to the East Lake area, and then on the south side through St. Petersburg, we did the top and the bottom. Then we would have a 75-mile trail loop that would connect everything together. And then the other trails would all be weathered beaches and things like that. That we took it to the bike committee. The bike committee liked the idea of it, but they were kind of nervous about how big the project was and how overwhelming it was. So I said, well, that's fine. We'll bring back something to the next meeting. So the next meeting next month, we basically took the package, took the 75-mile trail loop, and divided it into 15 different segments. And each segment we had one big chart. And then each segment had the players as to who the influential people were, which government was in charge of it, what the facility would be to put in there, what the problem with it, and had each 15 little mini projects. Took that back to the committee, and then they thought that this is doable, we're going to go ahead and do it. So at that point we went forward with doing the Pinellas Trail loop, they call it. And basically that tied everything together. So the beaches were tied into the main area and the downtown areas. And as I pointed out earlier, you've got where the railroad was located, went through all these downtown areas in the county. And basically they would tie a lot of projects together that would normally never occur. So basically, I'm going to get my notes like this. So anyway, we had what wound up with the program with the original trail was $8 million again, and it was 3 overpasses. By the time we were finished, we had 10 overpasses on the existing corridor, and then one over on the new Duke Energy corridor called on US 19. Basically, the theme was to have a safe place for people to ride their bikes, walk, or that sort of thing, or rollerblade, whatever like this. So basically, that's what we had. And it became a national model because one of the things was most of the people did not have the benefit of tying. If you go into an urban area, you have to buy almost like 100 feet at a time or something. But we had the Pinellas Trail corridor completely established. So basically, we were able to go through there. And actually, now the power line is doing the same thing. Then you went across the top of the county, and you kind of did have some corridors we worked with. But it basically became the alternate, alternate transportation for the county. And now that we've built so much of this trail, because I would say the Pinellas Trail loop is probably within 10 miles of being complete, which is pretty amazing. Probably 2 or 3 years from now, it'll be a complete loop, where it means you'll be able to go and bicycle on this corridor and not be on a road or anything like that the entire 75 miles through the whole county. You know, it's really pretty amazing. And one of the things that we also found was the fact that when we were doing these new segments, people would be concerned about security and crime, that sort of thing. So basically, we found there, we established, not long after the trail was first built, we established a security task force. And the security task force would meet every 3 months or quarterly for the year. And basically, they would go over the police department from each one of the jurisdictions, in St. Petersburg, the county, Tarpon Springs, Seminole, something like that. And we had them all meet in a room and go over things. So basically, they would exchange notes about all issues, what crime there was, and what the solutions were. So basically, it was all, we weren't isolated, so to speak. And people became much more secure. We found, first of all, there wasn't as much crime as people thought they might have been there. Most of it was graffiti. But the main point was it was all known. So if something happened in St. Petersburg, everybody knew about it. You could avoid it. Like, for instance, cutting back bushes and shrubs like this was a major initiative in terms of making people feel comfortable. But basically, the trail then became an established loop for the whole county. One of the things was, however, that like for instance, the people in the Brooker Creek Preserve up in the northeast part of the county want to be part of that. And we had trails going to beaches, we didn't have a trail going to the preserve, so we wanted to know if we could work with that. So basically, we got with some people, the president of the Brooker Creek Preserve, and also the county staff of the preserve. And we identified how you could take a trail from the loop over Keystone Road to the preserve entrance, but also found the preserve is not only on the south part of Keystone Road, it's also on the north part. So it meant that you could actually do more than just go to the existing preserve. You could actually go take a left-hand turn and just go up to Pasco County. So that's what we started doing. We then met with Pasco County as well and put together a program for how you could start with the existing Pinellas Trail, go to the preserve, and then up to Pasco County to find that grand out. And one of the things about things that I found with in not only transportation and trails that any kind of use is the fact that you need to have a plan first. You can't have some money without defining what it's for. And that's what we found with this was that so basically I'm saying we planned this trail and we put it in place between the two counties, connecting and how we would connect basically the Pinellas Trail to the Brookings Preserve to Starkey Preserve up in Pasco County. And our good fortune was that same year the Florida Greenways and Trails Foundation, which was a statewide group that I joined up with after retirement, they basically were working on a coast-to-coast trail. And this trail would go from clear across the state, connecting all the existing trails for 250 miles, and connect Pinellas County to the Cape Canaveral area and Cape Henry area. And so basically, they were connecting existing trails. They put together a package, we put together a package, and the legislature approved $50 million to do this. And the interesting part was that the Pinellas County, because we had the plans all in place, that was the first project to get funded into the program. The interesting part is, politically, I know some of you are kind of into the politics of things, that the legislature was surprising that it signed $50 million to a trail. But that was so popular and people were so receptive to it. The next year we went back and actually set up a trails program statewide with funding statewide, $25 million a year. So basically, all these things kept happening because people say, well, what does a trail look like? They come back to Pinellas County and see the Pinellas Trail and say, this is workable, people like it. And even though it's an expense people are willing to pay. So basically, we found that it became like Pinellas Trail became then the model for everybody to use, not only from Sarasota and places like that that are nearby, but also like New York City and places like that also came down and talked to it. So it became a really good model. And one of the things I found also was that people always want to know how many people use a trail. And that's always a question because you see cars, but you can't see people sometimes because they kind of look invisible. Basically, 140,000 people a month use the Pinellas Trail now, which is kind of hard to figure out now. I bet some people are using more than once a year, but the point is, that's a pretty big number. And so it's one of the most used trails in the state and nationally. The interesting part is also, when we were first designing the trail, I kind of felt the 15 feet we were looking at would be too big. It almost looked like a small road. But I'm so glad they actually did it to 15 feet because there's now room for a lot of, 140,000 trips a month. You gotta have some room for that. Basically, I was pretty pleased with actually the decision we made. One of the things we found was, because we were doing almost the first trail nationally, there was no standards to work with, so we had to make an assumption 15 feet was good. When we do an overpass, as an example, how wide should that be? As an example, our first 3 overpasses we did weren't 15 feet wide, then they became 12 feet wide. And I really wasn't paying too much attention to that until we were doing the 2 overpasses down in the Seminole area here. And but they looked overwhelmingly bigger. It didn't look like the natural part of the trail we had before. And it turns out the state that worked with us on it had designed it as a 15-foot wide surface as opposed to 12. And I realized the benefit of the 12 was a little more friendly because people are slowing down, they can work and they don't have to bump into each other as much on an overpass. You can go a lot slower. Basically, you're going to learn as you go with these things. But it's become, I think, a really enjoyable experience for me because I found I actually wound up when I was working with the county and we had the trail in. Twice a week I would commute from Arizona, 8 miles down to downtown to the courthouse, and that became my commute. And in fact, one year we would also have once a year, we'd have, actually it's a digression, but once a year we would have a promoting commute travel, having people do something other than drive their car to work, carpooling, transit, whatever like this. Well, since I was bicycling all the time, I had to come up with something different. Basically, we lived in Arizona right on the coast, so basically I organized a group to kayak to work. It's not something I'd recommend you do all the time. We took about 2 hours or more. And the time you're working against me, it took me 3 hours to get home, so it wasn't exactly, but you could do it. But then the interesting part was that first one that I did, I wasn't sure if you could do it, but I was in a meeting with the county administrator and he was kind of got interested in since he wanted to do it with me. And so then I wasn't really sure how smart an idea this was to go and commute by kayak, but I set it up, we kind of agreed to it. I got a little flashlight ready for the following morning and I'd be ready to go and see what it was. And what I didn't realize was when you involve some people like that, like the county administrator, when I got to the causeway and with my kayaks to take in and me down to work, they were the press were there. And you could actually, it was like daylight. I didn't even need my flashlight. But I remember the exit we made was really, it's kind of very shallow in that area, or you kept the causeway to Dunedin, behind the So basically, it was very flat. So the cameras would roll. We would get in the canoe, the kayak, and it would drop, just stay on the ground. It wouldn't move. So we got out of the thing, pulled it out another 100 feet, and then got back in again and still did. And we did that about 3 or 4 times. But the problem was the cameras could no longer cover us. But it's the point of digressing. But the point is, it's kind of these things have challenges to it, especially if you do them the first time, like that. We have covered my main points I wanted to kind of get into. The main thing was to then say that that as we went forward in the program, again the trails became much more friendly than roads. And so, for instance, when you build a trail, someone else in the county say, how do I say this right? People need to use a road to support it. Well, for a trail, someone can say, well, I'll go over there sometime, 15, 20 miles, and I'll use that trail sometime. So therefore, what I was surprised about was that we would get money for like the Pinellas Trail, and I was surprised other people in the county, the state would support that because they know they plan to be on the trail sometime themselves. Basically, it's kind of brought things together. I think probably the main thing was that communities started getting involved in the trail, is the point of it. And so the Board of Rivers and Trails Council that I'm on established the Trailways, a trail town program, where basically people could the downtown areas like Dunedin, they kind of bought into the whole idea. They became the first trail town by tying in your pedestrian, making it friendly and safe around the downtown area, around the trail, getting to and from it. Then that actually influenced the development that was in the trail. It was in the town area where the lower tide development, more pedestrian friendly, that sort of thing. So basically the subject kind of broadened out quite a bit. Well, this is kind of pretty cool. I kind of feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but I think I've got most of my points covered I want to cover. But the main point was that Pinellas County, with our trail, pretty much started, not just the trail for Pinellas County, we pretty much have now a program that's statewide and even national for recognized both, so that's pretty cool. So without telling.
So when did Fred's name become part of the trail?
What?
Or Fred Marks?
Oh, I would say not that long ago. I don't remember exactly when. It might be 10 years ago now, 10 years ago, something like that.
I never knew it was the Sword of Power or the Duke Energy. I always just thought of it as his trail.
Yeah, well, it's someone's probably gonna have to clarify that because it was originally the original 34 miles of the Fred Marcus Trail. And then the rest doesn't have a name, to be honest with you. But the interesting thing I was gonna say, remind you of one thing, which is that if you plan things and you're ready and you go forward, people then believe in things. So as an example, with in the north part of the county, the US 19 was going to be reworked going across the Yankton River. And basically, it was going to go from a 4-lane to a 6-lane road with a new bridge and everything. And then the railroad had gone underneath that, which is a tunnel underneath there, to go for future trail work to the other side. The railroad was in there, but it was not being used. So basically, the state doc said it'd be a lot cheaper to close that off and to do a bridge, this 6-lane bridge without the trail underneath it. And then I got with them and I said, but we need to have the trail extended because we got on the plan trail on the other side of US 19 as well. So basically they accepted that and then built in an underpass underneath US 19. And the same thing is true with US 19 in the Enterprise area. You've probably seen there's a trail going over the top with that Duke Energy Trail going over the top. Basically, that was originally going to be an interchange there, with the trail included in the interchange. And then state doc felt that it was too expensive and really couldn't do it. So they were going to take the whole interchange out. Basically, however, we convinced them to keep just a trail there with no road. So even though the whole interchange went away, we still had them to be overpass to go across 19 because you know the other way to get across 19. And now it's pretty good because that's part of the eastern corridor with the power line. Yeah.
Well, Brian, first of all, you're the perfect gentleman to lead the charge in all this, certainly with your planning background, and you were there at the beginning. Curiosity, any part of the trail named after Mary Grizzle, Senator Grizzle? She brought home Senator Grizzle the first 30 million, right?
Yes.
Any chance that anything was named after her except that ugly school building up in Margot? No, the poor woman, that's what she gets.
She's got that big pink building.
That's the ugly pink building.
The only trail I know about that's named is the Fred Marcus Trail.
Okay, and the other question is it considered a park by any chance? It sounds strange, but lineal park are very popular in cities.
Actually, I'd say yes and no. Basically, we got a lot of money for it because it wasn't a park. It was a transportation facility, and so pretty much. And I would say actually those are earlier in the program. It was maintained by the park system. They operated it. But because somebody had operated, but basically it's a more transportation facility. That's all our documentation for it. And that's how we got all the money for it. It's just like, I
Go
think,
where the
well,
money is and call it what the money wants it to call it.
I'll give you an example. I think we're looking at probably now over $70 million has been spent on all the trails. So, it's transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there surveillance cameras, and if so, how far apart, like miles, or whatever, do they have them all the way up to the trail?
There's surveillance surveillance cameras for trails, but it's only in St. Petersburg area. The other areas we really didn't need it. But there's a section in there west of US 19 in St. Petersburg, and there's some trails in there. That's a video cameras in there watching the trails.
Do they have like employees biking and, so somebody is kind of almost like.
We have a ranger program.
Yes.
And they work closely with the jurisdictions, police jurisdictions as well. But we have not only a ranger program, we've also got an auxiliary ranger program for people that are retired, that's why they want to volunteer, are also a part. Pinellas Trail Inc., people that come and give them money, give them uniforms, that sort of thing.
Cool.
No more questions?
You're a wealth of information.
Are you asked to come to other parts of the country to tell them how you started with this project here in Pinellas?
I actually don't. We find people would come to us because they want to see the trail. So, although I did go, I was professionally involved in the national organizations of trails, the Trails Conservancy, that sort of thing. So you'd be on those panels, and that's how they were in that city. Yeah.
Wasn't there a problem with downtown Clearwater where the railroad bed went? The people that lived near it didn't want it there, so they had to move it?
Actually, yes and no. It's pretty much still on the rail line corridor. But it's not uncommon. The thing is that a lot of times people oppose the trail, and then when you put the trail in, they like it. Like for instance, the example, the trail that we put in goes from Alta 19 in the Dunedin area, the trail that goes west along the causeway out to the Honeyman Island. Is the Royal Suit Arms condo out there was opposed to having the trail there. So basically, we put a bar at their request, like a railing bar, so people wouldn't sneak over into the area. And then we had to come back in a year or two later and open it up so they could now go and use the trail. But it's pretty much you have to deal with it. That's why the security task force comes in, because you can say, we know what crime there is and there isn't, that sort of thing, and we kind of work with that. But for instance, the newest segment of the trail that's being built, the power line, that's up in the Curlew Road area. It's up in the northeast part of the county. That still ran into some difficulty. We have to negotiate with property owners about here, not there, and sort of thing. So it's never easy to do a trail. But I think the thing that's helped us is the fact that the county's always been committed to do it. We're not going to not do it. We'll do it a different way, but we're not going to not do it. That sort of thing. And after you get that down, it pretty much works.
Question.
Yeah.
So I know you talked about how the trail's been extending. I'm familiar with certain parts of it. When you say it's gonna eventually loop around, what is the actual path of it? I mean, I know it's all the way up in Tarpon Springs, or where is it gonna go to loop all the way around in the same?
There's
It's
a
on
bunch
the
of
map.
brochures out there.
It'll have a map, but yeah, I just was curious about that, how far,
What's your question? You mean where it is?
Well, no, I mean, does it, because I know I've gone all the way up on the trail up to Tarpon Springs. Is it going through, we were talking about Curlew, is it going to go through, up through Oldsmar? And that, when you say it's going to, loop all around, I'm just
Okay,
curious.
well, first of all, I'll give you an example. You take the Pinellas Trail up to Tarpon Springs, and then you curve around, you go to 100 US 19.
Okay.
There's an underpass there. And you keep on going, and it works you down to Keystone Road.
Okay.
And then it goes along the north side of Keystone Road, goes all the way out to East Lake Road. And then it goes to the west side of East Lake Road, all the way down to the Chestnut Park.
Okay.
Now, the new section trail is being built along East Lake, south of Chestnut Park. And that will connect to the US 19 overpass in Countryside. And you keep on going down into Clearwater.
Okay, gotcha, okay.
But,
Yeah, so that's, I remember going from Tarpon, but that's pretty new than going to
Yeah.
Houston.
What's interesting was you can make long distances, and this is amazing for an urban area. You can actually bike long distances. And for instance, like Lexi and I, when we would take our anniversary trips, we came up with the idea of actually, we live in Ozona, it's 30 miles north of St. Petersburg on the trail. So basically, we'd get on the bike and we'd be out in the morning for our anniversary trips, and then go down and stay in Illinois.
Oh, you're smart.
You have a backpack and you take out your little cocktail recipe.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. But you could pretty much, you can't do the 75 miles just yet, you probably got 50, something like that.
Right,
And you connect it up.
yeah.
But it also, it's not just Pinellas Trail, even though it's 35 miles, Pinellas Trail Loop, it's 75 miles. It's all these other connecting trails that are different, that are connected to that. So we went to one to Honeymoon Island, is an example, we went to Clearwater Beach. You also got Tierra Verde areas all now going to be connected up. That new bridge they're putting in Tierra Verde going south down to the, that's kind of a trail on it.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, pretty much now, that's pretty much what we do. Every time we do a transportation facility, there's a trail in there, or there's a bike lane with some safe provision. What also happened for us was the fact that the Pinellas Trail was the laboratory for us to work with. For instance, with countdown, with be crossing the road as a pedestrian, it gives you the countdown, so many steps. We started that on the Pinellas Trail. That's where we invented that. So you get a lot of, again, we were always on the cutting edge. We had to kind of figure out how to do things. And another one was the expression to turn on the pedestrian crossing light before the cars get a green light. And then the pedestrian gets out, it's visible. So it's things like that we've kind of learned to do. But it's been a challenge, but it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
Besides us, I think Dunedin is another one, and I'm thinking of historical museums. There's one in downtown Dunedin where the trail comes through. It would be really wonderful if we were able to take the site. I'm sure there's a website where we can drop it onto our website and people, a link to open it up so that we can say, oh, if you want to come to Dunedin's museum, come use the trail. If you want to come to Seminoles, come use the trail. Is there a possibility of doing
Yeah, I think
something
so.
like that?
It's all work in progress, and we're doing things. And there's what we call the Pinellas Trail Inc. group, is a citizen group that works with all those things as well. They have a website.
Okay.
So it's, but yeah, it's a good idea.
Pinellas Trail Inc.
Yes, sorry. Actually, they renamed themselves Pinellas Friends of Pinellas Trail.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. that's
Just
okay.
FYI for everybody's, the trail is just west of this building.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can walk,
Yeah.
2 minutes and be on the trail.
Yeah, you can, yeah, you're right.
That's where the train stopped to pick up the fruit.
Yeah, you're right. Because the railroad was the connecting thing for 30 years, and therefore all products are trying to get it up the same way, that means that the development was really focused around the rail corridor. And even though years later, so that's what the trail has picked up on, that connectivity as well. Yeah. That's why you're going through a lot of areas like near downtown Largo, you got downtown Tarpon Springs, downtown Clearwater, St. Petersburg actually. So, the interesting thing about St. Petersburg is the original trail ended at where Gibbs High was, right at US 19, and yet the rail line continued on into downtown St. Petersburg, or actually, and picked up on, I think, First Avenue south. But the point is, that was a rail line, that was the gap we had in the system. What was interesting was that we got with a partnership, we had a partnership where we worked with St. Petersburg to build that link. So we went to we started to negotiate with the power company, with the rail company, and they told us that it cost $20 million to buy it. And so then we worked with St. Petersburg and the Trust of Public Land to do that kind of thing for a business. And basically they sat down with them and the figure became $5 million, which was still, but it was manageable like this, And then we, of course, had a good friend in Washington, D.C., Bill Young. And so basically that was where the $5 million was. But the interesting part was, it was going to take us some while to get through the legislature it took 2 years to get it. So basically, we wound up going and passing a resolution. They have what they call a rail banking program, where basically they'll hold the property so hold it as an ownership, and then get the money. So the trust of public land had an agreement to hold the property in advance, so called. And then we wound up getting that corridor built there. The interesting part was that we actually had to build another overpass over US 19. But it's kind of, but the point is I'm making it so, there are all these different partners and different agreements we had to get this thing done in different parts of the county. They're not all done the same way.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, good.
Does the county have any role addressing electric bikes on the trail?
Yeah, they do, it's, the technology isn't friendly to regulation, because they keep changing things. You can regulate something and then get it covered, and then they'll change some technology part of it, make it easier, but e-bikes are permitted on the trail, but only the kind that we call pedal assist. But it's kind of hard to start, because you can be highly technical, unfortunately. But some e-bikes are faster than that, and basically e-bikes are supposed to have like a governing limit of 18 miles an hour. But yeah, they're permitted, but a lot of other things aren't, so. It's like recovery.
What else is not covered in the
Oh, we will motorcycles, cars, things like this. You pretty much have, you can't power, you can't do it. It's actually a formula, some definitions for the e-bike. There's like 3 or 4 different kinds of e-bikes out there. There's only the lowest one. There's 2 kinds of described. Yeah. Yes. Interesting. Not only that they would be in charge of the contracts for mowing, but also they would be rangers along there. And the interesting part is the fact that, I guess they're doing such a good job. This is a very little known, but they now maintain not only the park system, but all the green space along the highways, the county roads are also maintained by the county parks department. So these lines get blurred in terms of who's what. You can't just say labeling or parks, what is parks people doing, or it worked better. We didn't need 2 organizations to do the same thing at different locations. But it was actually more efficient that way.